Hello guys, so welcome back to another video. In this video I'll be discussing about chess. So this video is for those people who are willing to play chess but doesn't know anything about it. This video covers how the pieces moves and what's the rules you need to know before playing chess. And yeah, I think that will be good enough to start for you to play chess. So let's dive into the video. So this is the chessboard. Of course you know this. In chessboard there are 64 squares. 8 squares are horizontal and 8 squares are vertical. So you may think, what's these numbers here and what are these alphabets? Let me explain this first. A is the first thing you see in the board at the bottom. There is also this number 1 in this board. What does this mean? This square over here is named as A1 square. Likewise, this square is known as A2 square. Likewise, we can name the squares. And that's the reason why the alphabets are placed at the bottom and the numbers are on the side of the board. In chess, columns are known as files and the numbers over the left side, or you can say it as a vertical side, is known as rank. This is the basic thing you need to know about the chessboard. Now let's see how the pieces are arranged. This is the setup. You will see the white pieces will always be at the bottom of the board where it starts with the letter A, and the black pieces will be the opposite side. The first piece on the board will be the rooks at the bottom, and next to it will be the horse, and then the bishop, and then the queen, and then king, and alternatively the bishop, knight, and rook. On the second rank you can see the pawns, so the same goes for the black. This is the setup. The easy way to remember this when you play on the board, like on a physical board, is you arrange the pieces based on its height. I'll show you an example.
This is the way the pieces will be arranged in a physical board. You can see that the rook is the smallest in size, so it's placed in first, and then the knight, and then the bishop, and then the king. This also, you can see this the order. It's like increasing, and the same goes decreasing here. Then the queen comes, then the bishop, knight, rook. So this is the way it's arranged, and the same goes for black. I just thought it's the simplest way to remember, like it's increasing and then it decreases. Also, for those who are willing to buy this board, I'll leave the link in the description because it's a magnetic board. You can purchase it if you want. So yeah, let's get back to the video.
In chess, white will be starting the game, and after that only black can move its pieces, and each will get a turn to play. Like first white will move and then black can move, then the next turn goes to the white. This is how it works. So the first piece we are going to see is the pawn. The pawn can move 2 squares forward on its very first attempt, and after that it can move only 1 square. If you play 1 square on the very first attempt, then you cannot move the pawn 2 steps after that. The pawn can capture the pawn on the right side of the same square as I shown in this picture. The same goes for the left side too. Now it can also capture the bishop, the queen, the rook, the knight, but it cannot capture the king as it's the most valuable and precious piece in chess. And the most important thing a pawn can do is when it reaches last rank, which is the 8th rank, it can promote to any piece except for the king. For example, it can promote to a knight, a bishop, the queen, the rook, but cannot promote as a king because there will be only one king who rules the kingdom, right? Same goes here. Then the most important thing which I want you to know is the passant, which most of them doesn't know. It can happen only when you are on the 4th or the 5th rank and your opponent is moving their pawn 2 steps forward, and now you can capture his pawn by putting your pawn in the crossed square. This is known as the passant. Let's jump into the next piece. And the next piece we are going to see is the rook. What do you think? How the rook will move? Well, the rook will move like a cross. It can go only straight, either by horizontally or by vertically. Let me show you. The rook here can move here, can go here, can go here, then can go all the way down, and the rook can also capture the pieces on its way. Same applies for every pieces. All pieces can capture every pieces. Here is a good question. Whether the rook on e3 can capture the queen on e8. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, the answer is yes, the rook can capture it. Well, if there is a knight instead of queen, can the rook capture it? Yes, of course, the rook can capture it. What if there is a bishop? Of course, it can capture it. Let's say the bishop is over here. Can the rook capture it? Yes, it can. If there is a knight here, can the rook capture it? Yes, it can capture. But the only exception is that the rook or any other piece in the chess cannot capture the king, because if there is a piece which attacks the king, it is known as check. I'll cover it when we see about how the king moves. Now, that's all for the rook. Let's jump into the next piece. The next piece we are gonna see is the knight. How do you think the knight is gonna move? Well, it moves in an L shape. As you see in this image, 2 squares to the left and the bottom of second square, it's kinda L shape. So this is how the knight is going to move. It can also move like this. This is the only shape it will move. And most importantly, knight is the only piece which can jump above any pieces. I also want you to know something about knight. When you put the knight on the center of the board or in any central square, it covers most space like you see in this image. But if you put your knight on the side, it can only cover up to 4 squares max and only 2 squares when you put at the corner. So you should be aware where you put your knight. Here is a quick question. Can the knight here capture the queen on f7? Well, the answer is yes. The knight can capture the queen, except the king. The same goes for every pieces. Now, let's jump into the next piece. The next piece we are going to see is bishop. It can move only in diagonals like this. It looks like X, but that's what it is. The bishop here is placed on a dark square, so it can only move in the dark square, either front or back. It can move like this or like this. The same goes for light square the bishop. Now here is a quick question. Can the bishop capture the knight? Yes, of course, it can capture. If there is a rook here, can it capture now? Yes, can capture. Now let's jump into the next piece. The next piece we are going to see is queen. How do you think the queen can move? Well, it's a combination of bishop and rook. Don't get confused. Let me explain. Here, the queen can go to the right, to the left, then front, and then back. It's the same as the rook. Also, it can additionally move like a bishop and can cover all the diagonals like this. The queen is the only piece which can cover more space than any other piece. That's why it has more points than any other pieces while you capture it. Points? What's that? I'll cover it in a separate video, along with which you can get to know what our so-called notations in chess is all about. To know that, stay tuned and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get back to the video. Now let's look at the precious and the most valuable piece in chess. I know you might have guessed it. Yes, that's the king. Well, you might think queen can go like a bishop and a rook. Then king can go anywhere in the board. It can jump like a knight, go like a bishop, move like rook, and even like a queen. But unfortunately, you are wrong. It can only move one square. It can be either front or side of it, to the left or back, or even like this and this. That's all the most valuable piece in the chess can do. Yes, you heard me right. That's it. It sounds funny, but the game is all about how you protect your king by using all the pieces you have. Well, you might ask, can the king capture any other pieces like other pieces do? Well, yes, it can capture any other pieces. For example, here, can the king capture the pawn? The answer is yes, it can capture. But in this example, well, if I'm asking you, can the king capture bishop? The answer is no. Why? Because the bishop is already facing the king, which means it's attacking the king, and it's known as check. Now, once the king is in check, the king cannot capture the piece unless until it can move one square and capture it. But in this case, the king is one square away from it, and the king should move now. And remember, when your king has got a check, you cannot play any other move even if you have a queen or any pieces. You can use them to block, but you have to respond to the check. Let's say you have moved a piece while your king is in the check. Well, you should not play like that because it's an illegal move. The king also has a special move where it can move up to 2 squares. It can be done only with the help of the rook, and this move is known as castling. Well, you see, if your king is in the center of the board, your opponent will get many opportunities to checkmate your king. I'll explain what is checkmate after this. A castling can be made only 2 free squares without any pieces between the king and the rook. Either it can be right side of the king, which is known as the king side, and then you can castle it by placing the king 2 squares to the right and placing the rook to the left side of the king. Likewise, you can do the queen side castling. The same rule applies for the queen side castling too. There should not be any pieces in between the king and the rook. As I show you in this video, you can do the queen side castling like this. Also, there are 2 objections or situations in which you cannot castle. The first thing is, you should not move your king anywhere on the board until you castle. Also, the rook should be in the same place and should not be moved either, as it goes for the king. Now, the second objection is that if the path where the king can castle is blocked by any other opponent's pieces, for example, in this position, the bishop is blocking the king's path to make the castle. The bishop is eyeing on the square where the king is able to castle, so you cannot castle because you are passing through the attack played by your opponent. I hope you can understand. Now, let's look at the checkmate. Checkmate is the ultimate thing which we want to achieve at the end so that we can win the game. So what is checkmate, by the way? Checkmate leaves your opponent's king trapped. For example, look at this position. Here, the rook on h8 and rook on g8 is placed, and the rook on h8 is attacking the king, which is known as check. So the king has to move because the king doesn't have any other pieces left on the board. So he tries to escape to the g5, but he can't even go there because the rook on g8 is placed, blocking the g5. The king has no room to go. This is known as the checkmate. Let me show you another example. From this position, you can see that the king has no way to go forward or side because the rook is blocking the front rank and the queen is blocking the last rank. This is also known as checkmate, and black won this game. In this case, the knight is attacking the king and the rook is also attacking the king, and the king has no way to go because these squares are blocked by the black king, and it's a checkmate. Black have won this game. I also want you to know about a position called draw, where either you nor your opponent will win the game. There are 4 types of draws. Let's see them one by one. The first one is where either you nor your opponent are left with the king and there is no other pieces left on the board. Then it's known as a draw. Also, here is a bonus info. If you have a king with 1 knight or 1 bishop and your opponent has the same, it's also considered as a draw because you cannot checkmate the opponent's king with 1 knight or 1 bishop. The same goes for your opponent. The second type of draw occurs when your opponent has only the king on the board, but you have a king and an extra piece. It can be either the rook or the queen or knight and the bishop. But you cannot checkmate your opponent and he made a total of 50 moves, then it's considered as a draw. Now let's look at the third type of draw. Look at this position. Here the king has to make a move, but all the opponent's pieces are blocking your king's way. This type of draw is known as stalemate, because your king has no square to go and it's your turn to play. Now look at this position. There is a king and the rook, and there is this rook on a file and another rook on c file. Now it's white's turn to play. Consider this position as this position occurs for the first time, then it's white's turn to play. The rook on the a6 has been moved to the b6 and the king moves to a7. Then again the rook goes back to the a6, then king goes to b8. Now the position has occurred for the second time and the same has been repeated again. Now we have the position again for the third time. This is known as the threefold repetition and it is a draw. Congrats! Now we know every basics about chess and you can start playing chess. Also don't forget to check out the link in the description for the chessboard which I have shown in this video. Stay tuned for more chess content. Until then, take care. Bye bye.